Welcome back to the Trinity podcast. It is season 2, everybody.
Hard to believe.
2023. We've had a little break. Have you guys missed hanging out and talking?
I have missed.
Yeah,
you guys
absolutely.
have talked.
We still talk.
Still just not with the microphone talking on the podcast. If you're new to our podcast, right here at Trinity, we want to help everyday people discover an extraordinary life with God. And this podcast is going to be built around, we've got a couple of pastors here. And in our ministry, this is Daniel Riddick, our campus pastor out at Oakleaf, Tommy Carr, campus pastor at Hammond, and then Tom Mester, our senior pastor. And what we do is we want to get together and we're going to be talking about things that are happening in our culture, things that we may be reading, seeing, and discussing. That's going to be the focus of 2023 here on our podcast. But before we get into that, I'm interested, can you all give me maybe one thing that you got for Christmas that you have used and you just don't understand how your life operated without this item? What's one thing that you got that you're like, that was the best Christmas gift?
Daniel, go ahead.
Mine's going to be hyper specific, and I think about this every day when I put them on. We have a farm, and so sometimes I have to wear boots, and I had these boots that went like just short of my knee, and my mother-in-law got me these like ankle high slip-on rubber boots. Game changer.
Really?
Absolutely love them.
It's a farm answer.
Absolutely love them. So
Yeah.
I have a pair of those. I would agree.
There you go.
Mine are Huck brand. Is that the same as yours?
It's
Similar?
exactly like that.
Yes. Use it for anything.
So,
Top that one.
yeah, it's hard to tell. So Christmas was so long ago, I can't even remember what I got.
I'll tell you what I got. It is something just super small and random. You know those little lighters that you click that they're really long and you kind of have to click them like 10 times to get them to actually light or whatever. One of my gifts on my wish list was one of those butane lighters that are like torches.
Yeah.
I've used that thing so many times.
They light your cigarettes
It
a
is
lot
amazing.
faster.
Yes,
Yeah.
a lot faster.
So Christmas is, and this is going to sound hyper spiritual, and it shouldn't. So Kit family got me a new study Bible with a goatskin cover and teaching and preaching notes at the bottom of every page, and like 3 satin ribbons for division of the Bible while you're teaching. Game changer.
Did they have your teaching notes in there or somebody else's?
Could be somebody else's. Yeah, that's true. It's the first inaugural Tom Messer edition of the study Bible.
I'll tell
They already
you,
got
just as a, my outlet, our family gathers quite a bit, and particularly more so our kids are kind of migrating to this side of town a little bit more. So they're at our house a lot. And so I love to cook. It's just kind of a normal thing. And I love cooking, cast iron skillet cooking kind of stuff. Okay. So Michael got me some things for that, both mostly around how to care for them, your cast iron skillets. And
How about that?
yeah, and so you kind of go from, you're making it up as you care for them to you actually have a system that it's always wise to invest in those kind of things, not just fly by the seat of your pants kind of deal.
I love the idea that you have a care strategy for your cast iron
do.
skillet. I love that. I love it.
I do. In fact, I'm actually getting ready to buy a griddle that has a.
So what's your
kind of
go-to
built-in-
in the cast iron? Like, are you like biscuits or what are we doing?
Well, I'm a big breakfast guy, and I do a big breakfast skillet that I've kind of refined over the years. That's kind of the big go-to. But like last night, I did cast iron skillet. It was just Lisa and I, but we did. I did chicken with vegetables in the cast iron skillet. Yeah, so.
I've seen people do this. This would be a great idea. One of these podcasts, we should have a Cooking with Tom podcast.
I love that.
And we could discuss topics while you're showing us how to cook.
Yeah.
We could do an on-location one of that. That'd be great.
Hey, it's got my vote.
My grandmother, this shows you, I was looking at this the other day. My grandfather on my dad's side was born in 1883, which that's 140 years ago.
Yeah.
My grandfather was born. I mean, it's just hard to kind of process. And then my other 3 grandparents were born in the early 1900s. And my grandmother on my mom's side, she had a modern relative to 70s and 80s. She had a modern electric range and oven in her kitchen, but she always cooked off. She rarely used that.
Yeah.
She always cooked off a wood stove and cast iron skillets on a wood stove that's top was, from me to Tommy, narrow. And I mean, that was just a normal experience,
That's cool.
Which your skill flipping pancakes, I
It's
saw it
impressive.
in action.
It was impressive.
Down at the rescue mission. We did a pancake breakfast. And I'm telling you, Pastor knows how to work that Blackstone skillet.
He does.
With flipping
There was
pancakes.
nothing else to do in Massachusetts growing
I
up.
know this is
knocking
really
it
far
out.
afield of
What else is there to
podcast
do?
matters, but I'm looking at a Blackstone griddle flat top with air fryers built
Yes.
into it. And
That's the deluxe edition right there.
it is.
This is great. We need to do an on
I'm fixing to
location.
pull the trigger on those.
Just get some avocado oil for it. Just a little tip there, avocado oil.
avocado oil.
Well, did you all happen to watch the Bengals-Bills game a couple of weeks ago? It was a huge primetime game.
Right.
I was sitting in my recliner ready to watch that game. Huge implications behind this game. Two powerhouses battling it out to see who can get home field advantage. The place was rocking, and really the first couple of series was just like, it was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, just both teams, it was going to be a high scoring. Everyone was looking forward to this game. And then pretty much most everyone would have context for this. But real quickly, the game went from this awesome game to watch to something that we've never seen happen on the field.
Yeah.
So Damar Hamlin, defensive back for the Bills, just makes a routine tackle. And I remember watching it live, and I saw when he went down, just falls backwards. I remember seeing the reaction of the players around him. I remember saying to my son or someone watching it with me, I was like, something's really wrong. I could just tell how the players reacted. And then how even the announcers, I don't even know how they were talking through this, and they kept going to commercial break and coming back. And when they came back, you could visibly see the emotion of everyone on the team. And obviously removed from that now, we now see that Damar's doing much better. He's been released from the hospital. I think he visited with the Bills before the playoff game. But I find it was interesting how there was a huge surge of public prayer that took place, not only on the field that night, but also days later.
We were at the
Days
Jags
later.
game. Braden and I were the next weekend, and the whole game began with both teams. So I think it's a huge rivalry game, and we got to win to get into the playoffs. The whole game begins with both teams coming to midfield, all taking a knee. Everybody, everybody's there, and they're praying for Damar. Everybody's wearing shirts, that say it. It was wild.
Yeah, it was on. And you all probably saw it. It was on ESPN as well. They paused one of their broadcasts, and one of the announcers was basically saying, "Hey, I know we've all been saying thoughts and prayers for Damar, thoughts and prayers for his recovery, but one of the announcers said, why don't we pray right now?" And prayed on live
On
television
ESPN.
on ESPN.
Right.
So I want to read you this quote and then get your thoughts. This is an AP article that said this. The intersection of prayer and sports has been especially prominent in the aftermath of Damar Hamlin's frightening collapse during an NFL game. All 32 NFL teams have included Pray for Damar on their Twitter avatars. ESPN's Dan Orlovsky, this is what I was talking about, prayed for the Buffalo Bills' safety on live TV. Countless fans and other concerned observers said on social media they were praying, and dozens linked arms outside his Cincinnati hospital. Were you guys surprised by the response and outpouring of prayer through this event?
Not surprised at all. I mean, I think it's a cultural moment, and
Yes.
there's a collision between reality, and that's the reality that people are deeply spiritual and they're helpless. They feel helpless. it takes moments like that to reinforce our helplessness. And, what else can you do but pray? And there's a conversion of, we are a deeply spiritual people that are in need of help. And the most natural thing to do in time of crisis is to look to something bigger than you, which is God, to help in that.
I think, to use your word, surprising, maybe what feels surprising about it, because I agree, I don't think there is anything surprising about getting into a crisis and turning into prayer. I think what feels surprising is there is, and maybe overstated, maybe that's what we're watching, but there is this kind of general, drum being beat that our culture and our world and everything is beyond that. It's completely secular, and faith is really taking a backseat. And I wouldn't say that's untrue in every area, but then you experience that, and I agree with you. It was a cultural moment. It's hard. You never know when it's going to happen, but all of a sudden, you find yourself, and you're like, everybody was all watching the same thing at the same time, and it's in those moments, oftentimes, that there's a little bit of a counterbalance to what I would call the narrative that God is dead and faith is dead, and everything's and all of a sudden people return to very quickly what they know to be true, and then two, oftentimes the expression and the faith of God. There's no one else to turn to. But I do think it feels surprising because there is this kind of narrative that we're in this completely faithless, spiritless, godless world. And so when you see it just kind of like out there, it's like, oh, okay, wow, there's still something there.
There's still something.
Yeah.
Well,
something there.
the thing you have to really remember is this: there's, apparent reality, and then there's actual reality. Apparent reality is what social media, what mainstream media is telling you, and they are broadcasting a narrative that's apparent. It doesn't mean it's actual, it's apparent. So you begin to form your opinion based on what's loudest, even if it's a minority opinion. If it's the loudest opinion, it feels like it is a majority opinion. If you look at statistics, people in America are still deeply religious. Right. People in America still pray. Now, that doesn't mean they go to church or they practice religion institutionally like maybe we do or the way we would see it. But it doesn't, that's actual reality and apparent reality are different. And there's a principle, 2 Corinthians 5:7, we walk by faith, not by sight. Sight, what appears to be true. Faith, what is actually true.
Yeah.
And in that moment, actual reality trumped apparent reality.
Right. Yeah.
And actual reality is we are desperately in need of God to help. And we're compassionate people. All of a sudden, it didn't matter if you were a Bills fan or not. Doesn't matter where the kid went to college. Doesn't matter. He's a human being who is suffering, and not just him, but his family and his teammates and everything around it. And so what became, all of a sudden, priorities changed enormously. It was an upside down moment.
Yeah, I mean, my 14-year-old daughter, which she cares about sports, but doesn't really care a whole lot about the NFL. After that happened and took place that night, like, she was asking me every day, "Hey, Dad, how's that football player doing?"
Yeah.
She was sharing posts on her Instagram about DeMar Hamlin. And it was interesting to see how it just infiltrated everything.
Yeah. What's funny is listening to y'all talk about it, and I have these very narrative-based thoughts. That's just the way I'm wired. So I think society intentionally, I know you said there's apparent reality, and there's also an intentionality behind what the media does. It almost marginalizes spirituality. It marginalizes Christianity. And in some ways, it silenced us. Vodi Bakum said it's the jamming of Christianity and religion in America. It makes you afraid sometimes to speak out. And so it reminds me of like this Superman effect or The Incredibles, that animated movie, to where you have superheroes among you, but society has pushed them into corners and said, "Don't come out. We don't want to hear that message." But when a tragedy happens, a school shooting happens, something that the whole world sees, I hate to say the Christians go in the booth and pull off the outfit, and here comes the Superman outfit. And so now you're watching broadcasters that you look and you go, I didn't know he was a believer.
Yeah.
And you're hearing the voice of prayer, and then you're hearing other leaders, and here comes the superheroes that have a connection to God, that at this time and at this moment, it resonates true to you. And so am I surprised by it? No. Not surprised by it, but I am encouraged by the fact that we do have the right to come out of the phone booths. We have the right to say this is a super connection we have with the Almighty, and the nation resonates with it at times of national tragedy and crisis.
Did this reveal and bring to the top then kind of how Pastor, what you were saying, a majority of people really feel and what their belief and faith is? It kind of brought to the top that may not be as evident because a minority in the situation can be so loud on, post-culture Christianity. Did it bring to the top how people really feel?
Well, I think there's two sides to it. One is, you on one hand want to believe, this will change the direction or the overwhelming narrative of what's happening in culture. I mean, think about how divided the world is. Think about how divided America is. I think is more specific, and how cynical, the left is of the right is of the left, et cetera. And, can't agree on anything hardly. Can't even, in that moment, we can't even elect a Speaker of the House. We got all this other, this political craziness. And then all of a sudden, you see something that we all can unify around. Yeah. And there's a part of you that says, oh, there is hope, But then on the other hand, there's also an enormous amount of cynicism. It won't take us 3 weeks to go back to normal.
Yeah. Well, even in I'm on Twitter. I like Twitter, but it's a whole separate universe of people's thoughts. And it was interesting within 48 hours after that, there was a cynicism even about the fact that people were praying, and even I saw. I don't know these people, but I saw, Christian leaders and stuff basically decrying the fact that everybody was praying and all that kind of stuff as this is just cultural Christianity. This is it's not sincere. It's not whatever, and that this is just more evidence that there is this kind of a base level, idea about God and faith, but it's not significant. And I think I know there's truth in all of that, but I think that's a really unusual take on the situation.
Yeah, it's a culturally unifying moment, but like Tom said, that doesn't mean it stays there forever. So you don't get your hopes too high. Over the break, I was watching some old news footage of when the attempted assassination on Reagan. So they're rushing him to the hospital, and he's about going to surgery. And, Reagan has this amazing sense of humor, right? That's what he was known for. So the doctors are like, Mr. President, we're going to take good care of you. So here's Reagan, who's faced with his mortality. He looks up at him. He goes, I sure hope you're all Republicans. And so the doctor looked down and he said, well, today, sir, we're all Republicans. Yeah. So there's these moments of national bringing it together, but you can't get your hopes too high that this is a turning point because there's no atheists in foxholes, but people come out of foxholes.
So here's just another perspective on it that I think is important. Do y'all remember when the kid that died on Hank Gathers?
Oh yeah.
Do y'all remember the
Boyle
Gathers?
Marymount?
Yeah. I mean that to me was more frightening and compelling, even not minimizing what happened to this kid, but the cameras covered this kid up, and he's in a football uniform, and I mean you saw it, but they did a good job of not replaying it.
Even the players were surrounding.
Right, they didn't try to sensationalize it or anything like that. With Gathers, you saw it. I mean, he died in front of you. I know, but you knew that whatever is happening to him, that's not good. He's not. You knew in your heart he's not going to make it. Kind of deal. So that was very traumatic. Now that's pre-social media, right? Different kind of coverage. In this case, you have two things happen immediately, or two sides happen immediately: prayer, somberness, unity, all that. Then you have this subculture. I wonder if he was vaccinated. Right?
I heard some of that,
So that comes out. Then the second subculture, of course they're going to call the game off. The only reason they're not calling the game off is they've got to have enough coverage to get all these commercials in.
To make money.
Right. So you have, in a microcosm, you have everything that's part of culture and the cultural narrative still in play. What drowned out the minority part of that conversation was this overwhelming sense of that kid's life matters more than these the Twitter subtweet kind of things are. And I think what happens is the louder voice prevailed, right? I mean, it doesn't mean the cynicism wasn't there,
right?
But the cynics had to retreat because we actually do have this unifying rally around something that's so incredibly important. And we all became Bills fans or Republicans.
So I did, speaking of like the whole idea of criticism of cultural Christianity, referencing Twitter, a couple of days after when DeMar was recovering, he actually sent out a tweet that was talking about thanking everyone for praying for him and God's got a different plan for his life. But then also in that tweet, there was, a couple of chosen words used, language. And if you would have saw the replies on that tweet, I mean, they did not hold back, and they went after, God saved your life. Now you're going to use all this language in your tweet. And it was pretty intense to see kind of the two dynamics between it or whatever.
I think that's I think it goes back to what Pastor Tom is talking about. Everybody feels like they got to react to everything instead of looking at this opportunity and seeing that all of this can be true. That God's can do something that radically change the direction of somebody's life, that in a moment we got a glimpse into, and I'm an optimist by personality. We got a glimpse into the reality that there is, of course, and because we're wired this way and God made us, there's a spiritual reality to the people around us, to our neighbors, to our coworkers, everybody watching. All of a sudden, everybody's praying, everybody's, asking God to save this kid, and it begins to point us to, I think, the opportunity that, hey, we really have an opportunity to speak truth and to help, what I would call, begin to help corral or channel the innate spirituality that God's wired us with, to know Him, to have a relationship with Him. I think as the church, the people of God, it's like this becomes a bridge. And I think prayer is one of the greatest bridges in evangelism to faith. If you look, and it's been several years, but if you look at, I looked at kind of a spiritual survey of our city. I think Barna did, of Jacksonville. This is a number of years ago. And it's like, X percentage of people, a lot of people attend church, a lot of people don't. A lot of people do this kind of spiritual practice. A lot of people don't. A lot of people read the Bible. A lot of people don't. The one outlier on the whole thing was prayer. And it was something crazy, like 90-something% of people say they pray. They don't go to church. They don't read their Bible, but they pray. And do I think that means 90% of people have some deep relationship with God? I do not think that. But I believe that it gives us an opportunity. And if anything, what happened with DeMar, outside of his physical health, should be an encouragement that, hey, there's a bridge here. There's an opportunity for us to help point people towards truth. And I think it becomes one of those kind of shining examples of what it looks like. We're all kind of wrapped up in one moment, so how can we think and talk about it in a way that pushes people towards Christ?
I didn't know that. That's disappointing, but not surprising. So they got vitriolic after that. So I didn't even see the text he did or what he wrote. So the culture of Christianity, you started that. Is that prayer part of this cultural Christianity movement? I would say no. Prayer is an elevated, higher than that concept. What you just mentioned, that's cultural
Christianity.
Okay,
right.
That is what it is.
That's
And here's
the
what,
example.
here's what my non-getting mad on a Tuesday morning would be, is like this. Why don't you get out of the process of DeMar's sanctification to his own master? He stands or falls.
Yeah. Right.
And it says more about the people making the comments than it does about his spiritual journey.
Yeah. That's really good.
Tommy getting fired up.
Just makes me angry.
Yeah, one last thing on this is that and it helps to kind of have a grid by which you process this kind of thing. Remember, even good people, even Christian people, have a faulty lens by which they view what's happening around them, right? And the two default lenses are religious people view things through a moral spectrum, right and wrong, good and bad, right? So moral people, it's always good to pray. It's always the right thing to pray.
There's a right way to pray, and there's a wrong way to pray.
Yeah. Then you've got secular people who are relativist, and hey, if you think that works for you, or if that works in a moment. And so sometimes there's cultural moments. And by the way, secular people tend to be cynical. That's where the cynicism kind of wraps in. Moral people, religious people can get cynical because they have an elitism. Moralism leads to elitism. That my way, is if you don't practice prayer like I practice prayer, we're the only ones that are right. We always have to be reminded, Christians particularly have to be reminded that there's always a third way to view things, and that's through the gospel. And so, in that case, we should be rejoicing that God can even use horrible, terrible things that we're living in the moment to draw people into a relationship with Him. That's really powerful. We should not use our righteousness as a way to demean or beat down other people who are not like us. And only the gospel gives you, life is way too complex. Again, Daniel talked about Twitter, the stupidity of things that people argue about. And they take a very narrow view, or life's way more complex than that. And that's a complex situation that we have, because of media and technology, we all seem to be, it almost felt like you were in the stadium living out the moment with, and you could empathize greatly. You got to realize everybody felt that way. And everybody was searching for a lens to process what they're experiencing and trying to make sense out of it. And prayer is a pretty good way to help make sense out of things.
That's right.
Well, we'll take a break right there, and we'll be back with some more topics. Have you made some resolutions for 2023? I know one of the big ones usually is, hey, I'm going to maybe work out more. I'm going to eat better. Or maybe you made one that I want to read God's word every day. So I want to invite you to jump on the F260 reading plan that our church is doing together. You can find it on the YouVersion app. If you just search for F260, it's 260 days of reading God's word. And it really is, I think the tagline they use is Bible reading for busy people. So you can go ahead and jump on that reading plan. We'd like for you to do it together with us. Again, that's on the YouVersion app, F260. We love for you to commit to be a part, have God's word be a part of your life every single day in 2023. So as pastors, I'm sure that you pay attention to church attendance.
Just a
little bit, maybe. It's kind of a side thing or whatever. Obviously, doing student ministry, usually on Wednesday night, I'm interested in every single teenager that's there. But one text that I always get is from one of our volunteers that does an overall head count. And it's not making that numbers are the most important thing, but every person there matters. And it's important for us to see how we are doing when it comes to attendance. So there was an article in Christianity Today that says this: church attendance declining among young people, singles, and those with liberal political positions. Let me read you this quote. It says, young people, those who are single and self-identified liberals, ceased attending religious services at all at a much higher rate than any other American. Every demographic has actually declined. But even before the pandemic, these groups were experiencing the most dramatic declines in religious membership, practice, and identity. I'm interested on your perspective and your reaction to the decline of church attendance among young people?
You know, I read that article in Christianity Today. It was based off of a research study that had been recently done, kind of describing attendance post-pandemic. And I think one, I don't know how much we've talked about it on the podcast, but it's like everybody, pastors, church people, everybody recognizes that something happened, or at least accelerated what was already happening, accelerated during that COVID season. I do think it's important that you look at stuff like this and you realize that it's happening at a greater rate or to a deeper degree within segments of the population. I mean, there's a part of it that I think we would probably say as pastors is that it's not surprising. And what it said before the pandemic, these were already in decline. I think it speaks to a real challenge generationally, and then to life stage. And then I think, one of the things the church has been embattled with, I feel like over the last number of years, is politics. And all three of those kind of begin to check the boxes. I think if you were to talk to the average church leader or people attending church, and it may be surprising to see it in black and white like that, but it probably feels like what we have experienced and what we are experiencing.
So are there problems that this is highlighting related to our culture then, when it comes to
this is the group I work with, right?
declining?
So 30-year-olds and under, I've worked with them a good percentage of the last 33, 34 years. And so there has been a little bit of a shift culturally. I mean, if you just sit there and empirically look at the data, you can see what's happening. But it's also, there's an intuitiveness about what has happened. So this generation, I would say, especially in the last 5-10 years, I never used to know what a conspiracy theory was, right? A distrust of authority, a positional issue with the church. So I did a series at the end of last year with our 18 to 30-year-olds, 18 to 26-year-olds. And in there said, this is the reason I'm not coming to church anymore. And so I just asked him up front, I said, hey, if this resonates with you, just clap or something, or just say yes. And so really what you found out pretty rapidly is church is something people do. It's not a thing that they're ultimately committed to. But also there's a distrust of authority in general. There's a conspiratorial nature of that age, that they have a distrust for a message being said. And also the position, the way we're declaring it from a personality standpoint, is a real turnoff to that age group. So we did it with some graphics too. They want to have a discussion, but they feel their church is a megaphone. They want to have an honest discussion about issues, and we're demonizing groups of people. And not us, I'm saying the church as a whole. Right. So there's a general distaste in that group for the way we're trying to communicate them through life. And so do I think it's a cultural thing? Yeah, I think it's held over. Even Tom taught me in the 80s, I think it started even back there. And it's just kind of continued, and now this group is the ultimate, they're children of the 80s. And so I think I can feel it after being in it for 30 years and ministering to those people and ministering to that wonderful group of people. You can feel that this survey is accurate. It makes perfect sense. And I think there are contributing factors that as a church as a whole, we better pay attention to, or we will lose an audience with them.
I think culturally it does. I mean, it's the reality where we live in an information age like never before. We're talking about, all of us, this is true, but we're talking about a generation now that has been formed within the context of smartphones and the internet, and having all of the information, right, wrong, true and untrue, all of the worldviews, everything at their fingertips. And then we live in we were talking about this in that first segment about prayer. We do live, though, in a secular or relativistic dominated mindset where it's kind of like, hey, whatever works for you, do whatever you want. What happens is you kind of have this lack of direction with all of the options available and little direction. And you find a generation that's being formed kind of privately and individually, because the individual self now is the highest regarded, kind of, you are the most important thing. And you put all of that together, And it is challenging, I think, for a generation who is still, interestingly, and I can't remember if it was in this survey or not, and so don't quote me on this, and I'm not going to give a statistic, but I did read this recently, who is still, though, as open to God and spiritual things as any previous generation. So what we're seeing is religious participation, kind of institutionally or whatever, church attendance going down, spiritual appetite unchanged by a young generation. And I think we got to figure it out. I mean, it's serious.
Here's what's interesting, Daniel, talking through that inside of that group of 80 to 100 people. Listen to them, tell them how you feel. Exactly what you said is true. They still have a desire for a relationship with God. That has not changed. Some of the things that got the largest, and I'm sitting here thinking my way through that evening, maybe the largest response is that character matters more than charisma. Mm-hmm. Well, the church put so much focus back in the 90s, early 2000s, like charisma, and man, there's going to be.
Right, yeah.
So, and they just shouted out, yes, character matters more than charisma. Substance matters way more than style. So it's that whole idea that cool church is dead.
Yeah.
We want real answers. And so there were some things they voiced really outwardly that if we listen to it, and I think we do, praise the Lord, a good job with that here, teaching with substance, not just teaching with this high style, high energy, that's all it's about. I think they want real answers for real life problems.
And one more thing, just adding kind of commentary to this on, there were three groups there. We just talked a lot about a younger generation. Mm-hmm. Then there was singles. I think that's also interesting on two levels. One, I'm not being critical. I'm so for the church.
Yeah.
But we have, especially the mega church movement, which influenced in a cascading effect, thousands and thousands of other churches, small churches, medium-sized churches, built hard around the traditional family unit. And I'm not saying that not right, wrong, or indifferent. It was, concentrated hard around the traditional family. Well, increasingly, we're getting into the world we live in where marriage is way delayed. I mean, so singleness is now a much larger part of life statistically. Right. Yeah. For the average American adult. Singleness is a much larger part of life than ever before, maybe in human history. And then on top of that, the priorities around that, and then the focus of the church have created a disconnect. So you got a church talking big picture. It's built hard around a traditional family. And you've got an ever growing group that's either, not even unmarried or that's in a non-traditional family. And I think same thing, speaks nothing to spiritual appetite or desire, no. But you start seeing a real kind of, there is a gap between what is, in the world around us and kind of how we've done ministry or are doing ministry. I think it's something we got to wrestle with.
Well, to speak to that, the article said 30% of adults who have never been married said that they've never attended a religious service. That jumped to 44% by the spring of 2022.
Wow.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So there's, again, I think like you take the Barna side of research and you take the Christianity Today. The problem is they tend to be snapshots and not movies. And the movies are always different than the snapshot. That does not diminish the value of the data or the information, but it's like anything else. You can go read somebody's statistics on raising kids, and then raise your own kids, and your experiences are going to be different than what the data points are. So here's reality. We know these things to be true. There's a big distrust for institutions in America. And the church contributes to that problem, and it suffers from that problem. Okay, and it's the most easily expressed in the idea that personal spirituality may not be going down and diminishing, but institutional corporate spirituality is. So there's an issue. You got to think that through. Second thing you've got is and I think what Daniel said about the way we shape church, it's not just that it's aimed at more of the nuclear family, but it's also aimed at generational. Like we want to think, hey, we're doing, because we sing, contemporary music, but in reality, church is church. We have an hour of corporate worship. We
preach, we sing,
we make announcements, we welcome people, we sing songs, we take an offering, and we preach a sermon. I mean, that has not changed in 70 years. Okay. Now there may be some nuance changes to it. What has largely happened is the pattern of the way that kids mature from teenagers to adults is different. The delay in marriage is different, right? And our discipleship processes are not clear. And this is anecdotal. It's not I had dinner with two separate dinners with singles in their 20s in the last 5 days. Talk to me about church. Interestingly, one struggles. Part of their struggle is the college years have been really disruptive in their patterns, right? And they're just ill-equipped. Mom and dad were getting them up and they were going to church. They have not learned the self-discipline, nor do they feel the accountability, and they feel lost transitioning from I'm a senior in high school and I sit with a youth group to I'm now a full-blown responsible adult. The other case, guy went through all that and he's thriving in church relationship, not because of what's being done programmatically, but a 40-year-old said to him, hey, I want you to be part of my small group. It's not just single. In other words, it's just, and he got invited into a group of people that are in a different life stage. And then the guy said to him, hey, have you ever thought about teaching young people? And the kid's like, no. He said, well, I think you'd be really good at it. And the guy's like, he told me, he said, just the thought that somebody thought I would be good at something, he said, I'm thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing. He said, now I'm doing it and I love it. And my whole conversation with him was largely, what's next? What do I do next? What's the next step for me? And so that tells me you're not going to solve the problem by, this big upheaval. You're going to solve it by making clear your discipleship strategies, connecting with people, relationally. The relational gap is huge. The loneliness factor, and that's probably the piece that COVID put on steroids. Is that you just look on a typical Sunday here, the people that come in by themselves, they don't stay. The people that come in groups, they're attached, they stay. If you can't get people who are by themselves to attach, they don't make it. And we have to put systems, we have to have a high sensitivity. I'm actually seeing this pattern that even families don't visit one at a time. They typically come with other families. Their kids connect. They connect to somebody before, and they're because they don't want isolation. They don't want loneliness. And most of the people that are coming to our church currently are coming in packs because they're really fighting that.
But see, that speaks so much, I feel like, toward and not to try to oversimplify, but the talk about solutions. So what do we do? Because I think there's a legitimate, concern. We don't want to lose a whole generation of people. And by the way, when we say a generation of people, like I'm thinking about my kids, right. So this gets very personal, and I think what he just described is a completely different way of talking about the context of church and the local church. And if it stays at the lowest level, which is how that survey is worded, which is attendance to an event. I don't think there was a day clearly, because the stats show us that attendance at an event meant something to people and they cared about that. And that's going down. Elevating the conversation of Christian community, and that church is a family, and that there's an opportunity for purpose, and that you can discover the gifts that God's given you, and you can make a difference in somebody else's life, and you can worship a living God, and you can receive truth spoken over you. I think you begin to elevate the conversation of what church is and should be, what faith is and should be. And it begins to reactivate what is still fundamentally unchanged, which is the God appetite that every generation and all peoples of all races and all classes have in their soul. And so there's a part of this that just we've got to refocus, I think, how we talk about church, and what it looks like to experience church. And then, how we program around it. I think we've got to address the realities of the world we live in, but raising it up off of that base level that, hey, you should be here and attend because it's the right thing to do. I believe that. Yeah. I'm just saying that message is holding less and less water, with the people around us. And I don't even think, for sincere believers, that's the reason why we're there on Sunday.
Well, I was talking to because doing student ministry, parents do talk to me regularly when they have a senior, and there's always that fear. How do I keep my 18-year-old, how do I keep them coming to church? Mm-hmm. I want them to get themselves up and to come on Sunday. And it's always a fear. I don't want them to walk away from it and be done with youth group and to be done. And I was talking to a parent last year. I remember specifically having this conversation that I said, well, it's all back to Christian community. Mm-hmm. I said, I would encourage you to get them into a group and to get them serving. When they find that they have gifts that they can offer, that they can be involved, that they can be counted on to be here, it really changes this whole dynamic of, I'm not just coming to sit in a chair on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. I've got purpose. And I was talking to that parents a couple of weeks ago. Their child is, a freshman in college. They're a couple of weeks in, or a semester into it. And they said, that has been one of the best things for my son. After he graduated out of student ministry, he has a purpose to get himself up to be here every Sunday, mm-hmm. because he knows he's being counted on and he has something that he can offer, and he's got a group of people that he's growing. And I really think that's, we say come, grow, serve, go. I wonder if grow and serve are huge parts of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Not just attending, but to grow and serve.
So my kids are 39 to 21, right? They all went through periods of time when they're in their college years where they had to reassess, and their attendance was more lax than I would have liked it to have been. But we survived it and we talked through it. People getting married, and the church should be pushing that. Marriage will wake you up in a lot of ways and make you responsible, and it's biblical. I mean, it's part of it. Here's probably where I struggle the most with the way we do church is, and I've said this to my kids. I've said this to my kids so directly that we've had pushback discussions about it. The reason my kids didn't go to church is faithfully when they got to be 18, 19, 20 years old, because we didn't have them in church when they were 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. We had them in youth group. And there's a big transition. Mm-hmm. If you don't listen to the pastor, if you're not taught how to, right? That's a tough transition.
Sure. Yeah.
And we need to be more strategic about that. We need to talk about it. We need to call it what it is. Mm-hmm. And we don't do a good job of connecting. We connect teenagers to youth leaders, but we don't connect teenagers to pastors. Mm-hmm. And we've got to do that. Yep. Here's the other thing. We don't do enough of this. My kids I know this irritates when we get into these kind of things. But think about the Christian life. Here's some words in the Christian life, right? Strive, fight, right? Pursue, discipline yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Bring your body under control. The Christian life is not mortify. I mean, kill, mm-hmm. right? Die. Now think about, why don't Christians do what they're supposed to do? Because they want it easy, right? And we create consumerism from people who attend church. We say, you come and we're gonna serve you. We're gonna give it to you as much as we can, like you want it and like it. And we're not saying to them, it's hard. Mm-hmm. Listen, Lisa and I talk about this all the time. We were in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Nobody was slick enough to say, come one, serve one, do that. You just came all the time. You served all the time. You did all the time, right?
Yes.
And my kids, it's hard to get them. If their kids are just, Mom, will you watch the kids? Instead of, because they don't want to fight them about the nursery, whatever it is, right? I mean, I mean, I don't know how many times I left my kids in the nursery and they're screaming their heads off, right? And I don't know how many times I was sitting in a nursery where somebody else dropped their kids off and they were screaming, and my job was to find a way to console them.
I know.
Right?
I know it.
But the Christian life is not easy. It's hard. I've got a kid in college. It doesn't affect me now. I'm so over it. It'd be a lot easier to just skip 2 weeks of paying my tithe and, pay 20% of his school bill. It's harder to do it the other way.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't think of doing that now because I've pressed it. And my point is this: we don't have this looks more like boot camp view of discipleship. We have this more looks like a circus, and we're gonna entertain you, and you're gonna find this to be really cool and fun. Life doesn't work out like that.
You get into, Jesus's seminal message, the Sermon on the Mount, which unpacks the kingdom ethic of love and everything. And everybody will conclude this. He wasn't lowering the bar, he was raising it. In almost every point that he made, it wasn't easier, it was harder. And I don't mean so we've got to work hard and this is all about our works, but it's like the ethic of the kingdom of God is not, and I think this is where it kind of plays in. Let's not lower the bar, let's raise it. Yeah. Let's call people to something which it is worthy of it. And I think it changes things.
So I know when this podcast is going to land and be released, but can we just talk about the Jags for a second?
Oh man.
Absolutely.
Duval. Little feedback about our Jacksonville Jaguars 27-point comeback in the wild card round.
So we got to say,
to defeat the
when people are
Chargers.
hearing this, it will be on the other side of them playing whatever happened.
We don't know.
We don't know what happened at Kansas City, but we do know what happened against San Diego.
So here's personal confession. So a little feedback on it. So we had everybody over to eat. Everybody left. So it was just myself, Rhoda, and Crystal. And despair by halftime.
Where was Ryan?
He was at the game. Okay. So, and I'll make it quick because I know we're trying to consolidate a little bit. So I'm sitting there and they're down 27-0. So I can get so angry at sports. Like my kids know, just clear out of the room. I can just get so competitive about sports and I have to watch it. So I actually went and got a fiction book I was reading and sat in the chair and watched the game while I was reading this mystery. And I used that book as my prop to throw, slam, and get mad. And so then they score before halftime. Rhoda's like, this is over. She goes and gets her shower. So by third quarter, you can start to feel the momentum. And then it becomes this cheering section. And then it becomes this. Now, I'd already executed the entire officiating crew by halftime. Like somebody should shoot. I was just angry. So by the time the game gets over, you slam it down and you're like, never a doubt. I was with you all the way. And so Ryan calls. Now, this is great. So he calls from the stadium. Andrew's down there. They're all down there. So he's FaceTiming us live. And he's like, this is the greatest night of my life. I'm down here hugging strangers that I don't even know. We're embracing and we're going. And so here's what I told him. I said, here's the power of that is it just speaks to the human spirit of a comeback. It speaks to you're never down and out. It's never too late to win. It's not over till the fat lady sings. And there was just this spirit in the city. So I wore my Jaguar thing the next day. And boy, all throughout the city, it's just amazing how people are like, hey man, go Jags, go Jags, go Jags, go Jags, go Jags. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a wonderful thing for the city. It's a wonderful thing for the human spirit. I've been trying to take credit. I told Crystal we were in this group and I said, they were going, what did you think about the game? I said, man, I never lost hope. And Crystal goes, Dad, you're a liar. You're just a liar. You were so angry. So it was just a great night.
Especially if I'm sure we've got people listening that are outside of the Jacksonville area. So you may have a low understanding of this. But there's just such a mentality of things have never really gone our way. Mm-hmm. And we've been bad and we have been. I mean, and then outside it's like
2 or 3 years.
Yeah. Very, kind of periodically something but it's flash in the pan. And, obviously that game, but even the second half of our season, it's like it feels different. And I think you got a whole city that doesn't really know what to do with it. But we're loving it.
Yeah.
And it may by the time you hear this, our season may be done. I don't think so. I think can we make some bold predictions or man, I think Jags are going to, I think Jags are going to,
don't have a gift of prophecy,
beat KC and,
to beat KC in
We're gonna do
But
it.
regardless,
Cool.
the season
season's
has
incredible.
it's incredible.
We love it.
It's just been incredible. I know Tom was with his grandson that night,
Yeah. So
trying to negotiate him into going to bed.
if you think back, a year and a half ago, or a year and 2 months ago, we were coming off the Urban Meyer debacle, and so we've lived in the last 15 months the agony of defeat and the thrill of victory. My grandson, he's all into sports. I mean, just as much as could be. And his mom and dad were at the game, so he and his sister spent the night at our house, which makes Saturday nights a little more challenging for us, which we're happy to do. But it wouldn't have mattered if it was 54-0. He would have stayed to the clock was
Good for
0.
him, man.
We
Good
were
for
going to
him.
watch to the end of the thing, and it was fun. It was really fun watching him live through the ups and downs. And I don't know. I got over being deeply emotionally invested in sports years ago. I don't know what caused that to happen. I mean, I enjoy it and I watch it. I look forward to it. In fact, I was looking at season tickets for next year, just not because I'm all that invested in it, but I know how much it means to my kids.
Listen,
And
you buy them,
let me
I'll
say-
use them.
But let me say this, and I know he's speaking so eloquently about it. So he's like, I was deeply invested in sports. I think this is a man who was kicked out of his own gym by officials for how
that's
deeply
what the
invested
kids-
he was in sports.
That's what's changed.
Well, yeah, but here's what you learn. I'll tell you what probably flipped me on it was the only team there's about 4 teams I cannot stand that I could never bring myself to root for. The Red Sox would be one of those.
Yeah.
University of Miami would be one of those.
Ooh.
There's just something
Tennessee
about them I
Tigers.
just dislike.
Two more time.
But it's really easy for me, like that DeMar Hamlin thing we talked about. Man, I love great stories.
Yeah.
I love and that's what's so fun about the Jaguars. It's a great story.
great
Yeah.
story.
And you want them to succeed, and you live out the highs and lows with them, so that makes it compelling, and it's fun. It's fun to be in a city. Look, if we're going to be a first class city, and we need to be, I think it's important for the overall health and well being and the good of the city. We only have one pro sports team. We're not really a college town, and I'm not being disparaging to the colleges that are here. Florida's a college town. Tallahassee, Gainesville, Tallahassee are college towns. We're not really that. If we're going to make it, we're going to make it on the backs of the Jaguars. And
Which there is hope for that. I saw my 2 grandsons coming in, saw the TV, and they say "Go Jags," and they're wearing
Jags.
Trevor Lawrence jerseys. So there is hope.
Tripp had a Trevor Lawrence jersey on, and during the game, I'm buying him a Trayvon Walker, who happened to be a Georgia Bulldog. He's a big Georgia Bulldog fan. So a Trayvon Walker authentic
you
jersey.
go.
So we're
Going all in.
on the teal. We have the black. We needed the
Okay.
teal.
There you go.
Well, whatever the outcome may be,
Yeah.
go Jags.
Yes.
Jags.
Go Jags. Hey, thank you so much for watching or listening to the Trinity podcast today. We encourage you to tune in every week. You can find us on the Trinity app, on the Apple podcast, or on Spotify. We will see you next week.